Thank you, guys. Yeah. Well, great. It's good to be with you in the house of the Lord this morning. You know what happened, okay? I want you to be honest with me this morning. I would like you to check with your spouse and make sure that they stay honest. But if you're like me, how many of you on occasion binge watch a TV series or a movie series? How many do that? Let's be proud. There's some of us. Look around. Yeah. You know, this is church. We don't lie in church, okay? I don't know where that phrase came from anyway. We don't lie, right? Okay? But I don't know about you, but you're in good company this morning because we all like a good story. Am I right? We all like a good story. We like everything about it. And I don't know, on a weekend where I have lots of time to just rest and relax, what I'll do is I'll get our streaming platform, either Netflix or Amazon Prime, and we'll watch a series of movies, one right after another, and just enjoy it. That's not for everybody, but for me, for another person, it might be that they snuggle up in a corner with a blanket over their lap on a rainy day and open up a book and enjoy the story as it unfolds. I don't know about you, but every generation seems to have its movies that it identifies with. For my generation, I remember I was 10 years old back in 1977, and I remember when Star Wars came out and how epic that was for me, because that was actually the first movie that I saw in a movie theater. And it was larger than life. I mean, it was incredible. It's cemented in my brain. It's an epic adventure, epic tale. All the characters are in place. It transported me into a world that I just dreamt about, space. In fact, I was the kid that was playing space Legos back then. And we had Buck Rogers on TV and Star Trek and all these different shows, and my imagination would go wild. I love a good story. How about you this morning? Possibly you're like me and you wish at times that you could unwatch some movie that you saw so that you could see it again for the very first time. Have you ever felt that way? Am I the only one that thinks this way? I am kind of an odd duck, but I love movies. I love good stories that are told. And today we're going to talk about sharing our stories with other people. We're in the series right now. If you'll turn and look right there, it says Transforming 500 Lives. We're in year 2, and we're summiting mountain that's called, the summiting mountain number 2. It's called spiritual formation. And there's 2 parts of that. There is the life-changing conversations and life-changing practices. Today we will be focusing on life-changing conversations. But before I go too far, I want to talk about what we mean by spiritual formation. This concept of spiritual formation, when I even speak those words, for some of us, it just kind of flies right over our head. It doesn't land. And today I want to put some handles on that for you. I want to give you something to grip onto and get a good hold. And I love the way that Eugene Peterson translates Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. His version is a paraphrase, and it says this. And if you look up on the media screen with Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2, we will read that together. This is what spiritual formation looks like. I love this passage. It says, so here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Take your everyday, ordinary life. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work. You're walking around in life, and place it before God as an offering. Embrace what God has done for you is the best thing that you could do for Him. Don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without ever thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. Readily recognize what He wants from you, and then quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you, always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings the best out of you. He develops well-formed maturity in you. I tell you, one of the reasons I chose Journey, and I chose Journey way before I ever thought that I would be here communicating God's word with you this morning. Way before I thought I would have a chance to be on staff with the church. I chose Journey because we have a tremendous pastor that has a tremendous vision. And that vision is for us to grow and to be healthy. And he has a picture of who he wants us to be when we grow up. That's fun. And I saw the vision. I heard it in his words. I heard his passion and his desire for this congregation to be something beautiful for God's kingdom. And he has people that are lined up, going in the same direction, serving God, loving God with their whole hearts, bringing the good news of Jesus to a disconnected world. And I thought, I'm in. I want a piece of that. And so I locked arms with him at that point. One of the things that our spiritual formation is so important for us because we need to grow as people. We can't be the same people today that we were yesterday. We need to keep moving forward. One of the important lessons that we need to learn is how valuable and how important it is for us to share our stories with other people. By the way, spiritual formation is spiritual growth. It's not following the currents of culture or doing what we think is best, but rather it's learning to listen to God and responding to what he wants us to do. It's learning to think and act like Jesus. And I see that around here. I'm gonna praise our shepherds today. I'm telling you what, we have been serving in church for 32 years. This is the first church that we've been partnered with that has shepherds that are actively loving and nurturing the flock. It's amazing the time they invest. It's a full-time job for them. It's their vocation. It's what they have been called to do. They are loving us well. In fact, even this week, one of the elders called to just check in to see how Darin was doing. I really appreciated that this week. This morning, I want to say something, and you may be tempted not to believe me. In fact, some of you will be tempted to explain it away, but I want to stand here this morning with the full authority of Christ in me, and I want to speak this. And so I'm building this up, okay? You got to help me with this. I'm standing here with God's authority, and I want to say this. Your story is worth telling. Your story is worth telling. Your story is much more compelling than you realize. People will receive it. They will be blessed by it when you share it with them. Don't underestimate the power of your story in other people's lives. You will impact them. You will make a difference. Your story may be what God uses to connect a relationship that's been disconnected from God into connected with him. Your story will take disconnected people and put them into fellowship with other people that love Jesus and love God and are following his lead and loving people well. Your story matters. You might say, you probably may even have 100 excuses why your story's not that important and why it's insignificant. I know because I felt that way for a long time, to be vulnerable with you today. I grew up in a church. All I've ever known is God's kingdom. I think there was 30 minutes in my life, and I'll share that story at a different time. There was 30 minutes where I didn't believe that there was a God. All the rest of my life, I've been nurtured. And so I often wondered, what's so compelling about growing up in a Christian family and in a Christian community? And then here we are. There's no twists and turns. But there were a lot more twists and turns as I began to discover where my heart was at. I'm going to share a story before we get into our text this morning. If you want to be ready with that, it's our main text will be, and it's just a verse today, 1 Thessalonians 2:8. If you want to turn there and just hold on to it, we'll read that here in a minute. But I want to share a story. I didn't realize where my heart condition was. Even though I grew up in a church and I was about sharing Jesus with people, my heart didn't match the message. It was 1986. I was a senior in high school, and there was a guy, I'm going to not share his name, but he was a childhood friend. And we hung out as children, and we had played together. We had a great time growing up. But then when we got to junior high and high school, we kind of went two different paths. I continued in this path where I was enjoying my church family, enjoying the life that God gave me in a Christian home, and I really was enjoying growing up. And then my friend, he got involved with some people that were leading him down a path of destruction. He got involved. First, he started to smoke, and then eventually he started doing drugs, and eventually, and back then, marijuana was a big thing. Is it still a big thing? Yeah, I get for some. But he was involved with all that stuff, and so our paths, we became farther and farther apart. And I had a life-changing conversation with him one day, but my life was the one that was changed. And he didn't know Jesus, but he changed me. I'd like to say that I'm the hero in the story, but I'm not. He was. One day we were in the hallway, and we had gone our ways, but we still were connected. And in fact, I found out later that he was the kid that threw a big rock at me, and I had to go get stitches on the playground. I had no idea for years who did it, and he finally confessed to it. He bumped me on the head with a big rock. But this childhood friend, we're walking around in the high school. It was just before graduation, and I blurted these words out. I'm not going to say his name. I'll make up a name right now so I don't offend him. Kent. I just made that up. Kent. Sorry, I got to grab my emotions here. Careless words. I said, Kent, there's no hope for you. And unbeknownst to me, Kent had been in a rehab program, and he was in recovery as a senior in high school. And he had disappeared for a while. I didn't know where he went, but then he was back. And when I said, Kent, there's no hope for you, he sobered up and locked eyes with me. And he said, Darin, you of all people should know that there's hope. Oh. A life-changing conversation for me. I realized at that moment that even though I was doing all the right stuff and I was following God and I loved God and I was sharing the message of Christ with people, in fact, I tried to share the message of Christ with him, that my heart didn't match what I was saying. I had a love problem. This morning, I'm convinced that one of the obstacles that we don't share our story with other people is because we have a love problem. We may have a love problem. It's God's desire that none should perish. I want to help create this picture this morning. He is working behind the scenes, placing you in situations, and he wants you to join him at what he's doing. He is at his redemptive work all the time. In fact, Henry Blackaby brings to our attention right now, God is at work all around us. He's at work this morning in this place. I just want to let you know that he is at work in extraordinary ways and you could never imagine. His creativity, his desire is that none should perish and that he is leveraging every opportunity to bring somebody in connection with him. And this morning, that might be you. You might realize, in fact, your heart might start to quicken this morning as you sit there thinking, maybe this is the day that I'll make Jesus the leader of my life and the forgiver of my sins. But he's working, and your story is part of that. Your story and your life, they're worth telling to people. You're up to it. It's more natural than you could ever imagine. He is for you. He is with you. He wants you to share your story with people. I believe that sometimes when God gets involved, astonishing and powerful things begin to happen. When God stirs in the hearts of people, some amazing things begin to happen. I think it's a love story is what it is. How many of you love an underdog story? I like an underdog story. This chapter that we're going to look at, this verse, 1 Thessalonians 2:8 this morning, is an underdog story. I'll read the scripture with you this morning, and then I'll share some back history to it today. We pull that up on the media screen. 1 Thessalonians 2:8. It says this in the NIV. And I'll share the backstory in a minute. I'm going to get ahead of myself if I'm not careful. So we care for you because we loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. I love the way the ESV puts it, and we'll pull up that slide. It says, so being affectionately, can you say that out loud? Affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because we had, I'm sorry, I'm dyslexic. I'm working on it this morning. The gospel of God, but also on our own selves, because you had become very dear to us. A little background on that passage. The Apostle Paul is on his second missionary journey, which included a visit to the prominent Greek town of Thessalonica. This city stood along a major land route and a prominent seaport. You could see it if you read Acts chapter 17. You'll see some of Paul's journey there. We find out that a number of individuals became followers of Jesus while Paul was there. They received his message wholeheartedly about the gospel of Jesus Christ. But eventually an angry mob was stirred up and they ran Paul out of town. So his stay was brief there. Later, while Paul was in Athens, he received a glowing report that believers in Thessalonica were growing spiritually and serving God fervently. Paul then writes his first letter to the church in Thessalonians. He expresses gratitude for the believers, and he praises and celebrates their spiritual progress. They're growing in the midst of persecution. Paul refers to the people in Thessalonica that are growing in their faith as his glory and joy. I wonder if that's how we feel towards our church plants. They're our glory and joy, the people that we share Christ with, and as they grow in their faith, our glory and joy. They're the underdog in the story. They have a community of people that aren't fully receiving the good news of Jesus, and yet they're growing and they're flourishing. They're multiplying, and they're being the church that Paul had established through Jesus Christ's death on the cross. I'm convinced that our stories will be compelling to other people. And as we grow and think more like Jesus, that we will end up having the title that Jesus had. His title was a friend of sinners. I want to ask you a personal question this morning. I'm going to check our time. A personal question this morning. When was the last time that you had a disconnected person over for dinner? I'm using our language. A person that's pre-Christian. When was the last time you had them over just to be in their life? It's been a while, maybe. I want to encourage you to consider being friends with people of the world. I know my Savior was, and the more that we become and think and act like Jesus, the more we're going to be in the world. We're going to be salt in the world. We're going to make a difference. By the way, I think the best way we can make a difference is just listening to their stories, asking them, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me your story. And then listen. Unfortunately, I think we have a habit of not listening when people are talking. We often will find ourselves formulating our next thoughts, what we want to express. But I mean really actively listening to people around us. When the people in our lives feel unheard and unknown, and we got radars, by the way. We're pretty quick to pick this up when we're talking with somebody and they're not listening. When people feel like they're not being heard or that they're not known, ultimately they don't feel loved. Listening to someone equals love. Learning to listen is a skill that we must learn if we're going to love people well. For the extroverts, you might need to shut up. And for the introverts, you might need to be a little bit more courageous and speak out a little bit more. But it's important for us to listen to other people's stories and love them by listening and really enjoy being in the moment with them. Really enjoy them as people. I think the difference between, I watched Jesus flourish in all these relationships he had around him. You know, I look at the woman at the well and Zacchaeus and the blind man, and I look at all these different stories of Jesus connecting with people, and what I see is that he just really loved being with them. I know that might not be your favorite thing. How many of you seen the movie Elf? Epic Christmas classic, okay? There's a scene in there where Buddy the elf, he's a human boy that ends up being raised by elves. It's a great story, by the way. And he ends up going to New York City from the North Pole to look for his father. And he ends up in Gimbel's toy store, and he dresses like an elf does, even though he's a grown man. And so the manager of the department store felt like he was one of his workers because he was dressed in this outfit of being an elf. And so the manager comes up to him and he says, he goes, what are you smiling for? He goes, I like smiling. And he goes, why are you smiling so much? He goes, I like smiling. It's my favorite. And he goes, well, make work your favorite. Make work your favorite, not smiling. Make work your favorite. I want to ask you this morning, with the depth of my heart, make people your favorite. People are messy. You're messy. We come with all sorts of baggage. So many things. We could sit and pick each other apart left and right. But when Jesus sat with a person and spoke with a person, he was connecting with them. And he was loving them. Well, this morning I want to share with you, there are typically 5 parts of of a story, a good story. First of all, there's the protagonist, and then the antagonist, and then an inciting action, a conflict and a resolution. The protagonist is what we would call the hero in the story, or the lead. The antagonist is the villain, or the opposition to the lead character. Often, it's the very thing that creates the tension in the story, is their relationship and how they're interacting with each other. Often the antagonist drives the protagonist towards growth and change in their life, and we begin to identify with them and celebrate with them. The inciting action is probably the first 2 or 3 chapters of a book or the first scenes of a movie where they establish the characters and you start to learn the scene and how things are going to work. This is where we introduce the main characters, including the hero, the villain, and the main problem that the hero will have to face. This grabs our attention and we begin to have a connection with the characters, and it propels the reader or listener or viewer forward. And then there's the conflict. Conflict, by definition, is some sort of turmoil or challenge, some challenge to overcome, or a quest or a mystery to be solved, or a struggle. The conflict creates drama, and drama makes the reader want to read more. Conflict drives the characters forward in the story. And all of this comes to the resolution or the climax. It's the pivotal moment in the narrative where the audience finally is told that the characters win and that the conflict is resolved. The conflict comes to an end. The story makes sense at that point, and it satisfies the reader and the listener. By the way, there was a movie that my wife and I watched. I'm not even going to tell you the name of it because it was such a bad movie. It was horrible. It was and at the end of it, all through the movie, this older lady in the story, she would say, "I saw something nasty in the woodshed." She said that over and over again throughout the movie. And so the whole movie, my wife and I are waiting to find out what was nasty in the woodshed. And we get down to the end, and the movie was over. I was ticked. That was the worst movie of the world. It was horrible. It was funny, I have a friend of mine that loves that movie. And I'm going, why? We never find out what's in the woodshed. I saw something nasty in the woodshed. Oh, my goodness. I mean, she was saying that over and over again. So all movie, you're waiting to find out what was in the woodshed. Nothing was in the woodshed because they never told us. There was no resolution. We like to have a resolution. We like to see things solved and be satisfied. And here's the thing. As long as we live, our stories may not come to a complete resolution. But let me give you a recipe for sharing your story with somebody, some building blocks. First of all, 3 parts to it. Let's not have 5 different parts to it. When we build our story, when we get ready, and I'm encouraging you to get ready and prepare your story in advance, okay? Take some time to do that. That's one of the challenges I'm going to have for you this morning. Get ready in advance. First of all, what was your life before Jesus? Describe it. Who were you before you met Jesus? That's the first block. The middle block is how you met Jesus. How did you get introduced to him? And then the last block is my life since I met Jesus. What your life has been like since then. And just realize that our story's not over yet. As long as we live, our story continues. Let me encourage you, the best days of your story are still yet to come. Let me encourage you to ask God for help. Pray. Be you. Keep it real. Keep it short. Not like the sermon. Write it down. Peter, Jesus' follower and friend, he told us this in 1 Peter 3:15. He says, always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give reason for the hope that you have. Not like Kent. There is hope. And we are the dispensers of hope in people's lives. Here are 5 tips that I'm going to throw at you towards the end here. Ask God for help. You be you. Keep it real. Keep it short. write it down, practice it out loud. Application this morning. Today I want to ask you not to make some big life decision. I want to ask you to consider taking a baby step this week, or maybe even this month. I'd like to ask you to consider this. Take a small step towards your divine vocation of introducing people to Jesus. Maybe it's write out your story. Write a 3-minute version, a 10-minute version, or a 20-minute version, and have those available. But do that this week. Another is pray. Maybe even use the Ephesians 4:22 model that we've been praying at 4:22 every day. My alarm goes off. Does yours? Maybe use that time to remind yourself to pray that your heart would match God's with how you view people. Pray that you will see people as He does. Pray that the Lord will open your eyes to see where He's at work. And by the way, if you see God at work, often that's an invitation for you to join Him at what He's doing. Most often. Pray that the Lord will open your eyes to see where He's at work around you. Maybe another is to intentionally listen to a friend and invite a friend that you've been meaning to connect with for some time. Maybe this week or this month, you will invite them to share their story with you. Hey, can we go out for coffee? I'd like to hear your story. It's as simple as that. And watch what God does. And be willing to share yours if they ask. Be prepared to do that. Take all the pressure out of it. Be flexible and don't force it. Allow it to be natural, because it's more natural than you ever realized. This Christian faith isn't rocket science. It's basically being a friend to somebody. That's what discipleship is being a friend, pointing people to Jesus as we point and we go with them. It's friendship. It's more natural than you can ever imagine. And leave the results up to God. Don't own the results. If somebody doesn't respond to Jesus, it's okay. I had a friend of mine that he was a non-believer. He came to church one Sunday because I asked him to, and he came and he was in our community group, and I was at my wife and I had showed up at the community group late, and he came, and he didn't know Jesus yet. He was disconnected, and it was somebody that I was just a friend to, and he wanted to come and hang out with other friends, and so he came to our community group, and as we pulled up, he ran right out. I just got done preaching, and after I was done preaching, he got up immediately and left, and I had a time where I was asking people to respond to Jesus, and he just got up and left, and I thought, oh, I blew it with him. And so in my head, when I pulled up to this life group Sunday afternoon, I spit on you, by the way, I'm sorry. That you're blessed, okay? Or gonna get sick, one of the two, but anyway. And as we drove in, he comes right out of the house because he had got there early because he wanted to talk to me. He just comes running right up to the car, and as I'm getting out, he goes, "What was all that about?" And I'm thinking, oh, great. And I said, I wasn't speaking to you. And he goes, "Yes, you were." And I go, "No, I was talking to the congregation. I didn't target you." And he goes, and he began to talk to me about the gospel of Jesus Christ at that point. One of the things that I had put in my mind, that as if this gentleman would never respond to Jesus, he would be my friend for the rest of my life. I think that should be our goal with people, is if they never turn towards walking with Jesus with us, we still remain in their life and still love them and still care about them. And with hopes and prayers, we want them to come to know Him. but take that expectation out. It's not our job to bring it home. That's God's job, to do the supernatural. It's our job to just love.